I'm just gonna get the video started, I guess. As you probably know if you've watched any of my videos before, I'm a pretty big fan of Pixar. I mean, WALL-E is my favorite movie of all time, and of course, Disney is the company that produces Pixar films. Now, if Disney movies are known for anything specifically, it's that they have incredible villains. Pixar, on the other hand, though, you don't really see too often mentioned for their villains. But most of Pixar's movies do still have villains, so I'm going to be ranking all of the villains in Pixar's movies, with some exceptions, of course. Obviously, not every Pixar movie has a villain, so I won't be talking about any of those. Also, there are some characters that you always see people talk about as Pixar villains that I don't really think count as such. Like Darla from Finding Nemo or Anton Ego from Ratatouille, I wouldn't really consider villains in the same way as some other Pixar villains that I'll be talking about soon. Oh, and spoiler alert for every Pixar movie, by the way, because, you know. So if I don't mention any characters on this list, you can assume that I don't really consider them a villain or an important enough villain in their movie. I've seen some places that list the Barracuda from Finding Nemo as a villain. Where would I put that on my ranking list? Of course that doesn't count. That's stupid. And speaking of stupid, let's just start this list right out, Okay, so I didn't talk at all about Cars 2 in my Pixar ranking video. I hate that movie so much. Cars 2 has villains. Guess I'll just talk about them now so that I can get it out of the way so I don't have to talk about Cars 2 on this channel ever again. Cars 2 is essentially just a James Bond parody complete with car James Bond and a Bond villain type character whose name is Professor Z. I don't remember what the Z stands for, because I don't care. He's the red herring, and he's a really obvious red herring from the start. It's just like, who could he possibly be working for? So right from the moment you meet Miles Axelrod in this movie, it's pretty obvious that he's the villain. He's a billionaire or something who's setting up a big Grand Prix around the world. He's doing this as like an advertisement for his special brand of alternative fuel. Turns out that all in all reacts to, I don't remember, EMPs. He has a device that looks like a regular video camera, so his goons can sit up on a high place, look like they're shooting footage of the race with their camera, but actually they're focusing it on the cars and making their oil tanks explode so they're not able to race. And he's using this to try to bring about the end of alternative fuel by disguising his fake alternative fuel, which is just gasoline, and forcing the competitors to use it during the races, make it look dangerous, and end all alternative fuel. So yeah, when your evil scheme is to create something just to get rid of, what's the purpose of that? They're the worst Pixar villains easily because their own plan sabotages themselves, which I don't really understand why. I don't know, I don't care, no one cares. Cars 2 sucks, just move freaking on. Is next the stupid bird from... Okay, so The Good Dinosaur is a movie that exists. Don't know if you knew that. I'm not a fan of The Good Dinosaur. I don't think it's a very good movie. It does just steal a lot from other better movies like The Lion King, and the I Need to Get Back Home plot is just nothing original at all. It's almost just a dog movie. There's a group of bird dinosaurs. I don't want to say pterodactyls because I don't think they actually are pterodactyls. Some bird boys that are they're basically scavengers. A storm happens and they're looking for survivors so they can eat them. And their leader is named Thunderclap or something stupid. He convinces Arlo he's nice, eats a fluffy creature, then he sees Arlo's friend Spot that he's definitely friends with okay, I'm not ranting too much about The Good Dinosaur, just this villain. This stupid bird, this is what he does in this movie. He tricks Arlo, he eats a thing, tries to eat Arlo's friend, is attacked by dinosaurs, leaves, comes back later, tries to eat Arlo's friend, gets attacked by dinosaurs, leaves. They just did basically the same thing for this stupid bird in 2 different scenes. This movie didn't need to have a villain, since the whole point is just Arlo needs to get home. Adding a villain is completely unnecessary. And this villain doesn't do anything to enhance the story or show that it does have a reason to have a villain. Because it's just a stupid bird that doesn't have any sort of menacing or threatening presence at all. He gets defeated by, like, a 3-year-old child. You're supposed to be a threatening, scary dinosaur bird and you can't even stop a kid? What is wrong with you? The dinosaur is just pretty boring and dumb, and this villain just straight up sucks. I hate it. Speaking of characters in movies that don't really need to have a villain for the story to work and aren't even very interesting at all regardless, Brave. Okay, so in my Pixar ranking video, I defended Brave and I said that I like it. Since rewatching it recently, I don't still hold that opinion. But the villain in Brave is a bear that's a big monster bear, and he's a bear. So Merida turns her mom into a bear, and she doesn't actually get punished for this, even though it's a big deal. She's not the first person to be turned into a bear by the witch's spell, because the witch reveals in a story that she gave a spell to a prince who wanted to be stronger than all of his brothers, and it turned him into a bear, and their kingdom crumbled, and he killed them, and I don't know how accurate that was to the actual story that they tell, because I don't care. Mordu is another one that's barely really a villain at all. He's just a bear that attacks Merida because he's hungry and needs to eat, I guess, but he's evil because he killed his family. Why he goes after Merida specifically, like 3 times in this movie, I don't know. He's only above Thunderbird because he actually has some level of story relevance, but it's not good story relevance. Next. Okay, so I guess it's time to talk about Incredibles 2's villain. I haven't watched Incredibles 2 in like 2 years, so there's a lot I don't fully remember. I'm sure rewatching it, which I will be watching it again soon, I will have a more fresh opinion on it. Since I haven't seen it in a while, I'm not fully sure how to feel about it. But I know how I feel about the villain. This villain kind of is bad. So the villain in The Incredibles 2 uses the code name of Screenslaver. I get a message from Screenslaver who's like hypnotizing people with their screens. Elastigirl goes to fight him and wins, and they later find out that the Screenslaver actually is not this random person that was forced to wear this mask and fight. The actual villain is Evelyn. Everyone's favorite character. Evelyn, you know? So at the start of The Incredibles 2, this rich guy named Winston, who's a superhero rights advocate, I guess, he invites Mr. Incredible, Elastigirl, and Frozone to basically try to get superheroes to be legal again, and his sister Evelyn is working with him, but we later find out that she wants superheroes to be illegal because she doesn't think they actually help more than they hurt people. So here's your villain's plan in this movie. Superheroes are illegal. I want superheroes to be illegal. So I shall make superheroes legal to make them illegal and give them a bad image. What? That's so counterproductive that you might as well just not even do anything in the first place. Why not just drug your brother so that he doesn't try to make superheroes legal again? Much less, she's not really threatening at all. Her entire plan is to hypnotize superheroes to make them do evil things so that they'll get criminalized again. But this villain doesn't have any interesting presence. She just is kind of there. I think Evil Endeavor is a lame villain because her plan makes no sense. When you think about it, it's actually kind of the same plan as the villains in Cars 2. We don't like this thing. Let's make it popular to make it unpopular. Yeah, so Incredibles 2 decided to copy the plot of Cars 2. You wonder why some people didn't like that movie. Whatever, just next. Speaking of Cars 2, let's talk about Cars, the first one. Chick Hicks, the villain in the first Cars. Oh my word, I don't have too much to say about him. I didn't really consider him a villain for a while. I just thought, he's just a bully who doesn't do anything. As I started to think about it more, I decided he does really count as the full antagonistic role because he's so full of himself and everything. Like Lightning, who also is super full of himself, is determined to get to California before Chick because somehow that will make him win the race, I guess. I don't know, Cars doesn't make that much sense. So because of that, Chick Hicks kind of takes over Lightning's psyche. He has a daydream where Chick wins the race and gets signed with Dynaco, which is, of course, Lightning's worst dream at the time. But that's not all, because at the end race, where it's just Lightning, Chick, and the King, who is old and close to retiring, this is actually his last race, Chick, on the last lap, pushes the King to the side violently and crashes him, allowing Chick to win. This actually helps Lightning to prove that he is a changed person, Car, by helping the King to cross the finish line before him, instead of just leaving him in the dirt. Yeah, he's not like a great villain, but we are getting into the better ones because I do think Chick has a more pertinent effect on the plot of Cars and the character growth in Cars than the previous ones. Who next? Who's next? Sid, yes! Ooh, people are gonna be mad at me for not having Sid at the top, but here's the thing about Sid. Even though he's the very first original Pixar villain, he's not that interesting. Don't get me wrong, I do like Sid. I think he's a really creepy character, but I actually feel worse for him at the end of Toy Story than I do for the toys in Toy Story. Sid is a bad kid, kind of. He blows up toys because clearly his parents are neglectful and let him play with explosives. And he also bullies his sister. And that's really all he does. He mainly just serves as a plot device in the second act of Toy Story, because this allows Woody and Buzz to have time to be together. They're forced together now. And this also lets Buzz learn his lesson that he's not an actual space ranger. I can't lie, Sid is an entertaining character for sure. And the mid-90s CG, you know, it's obviously really dated, so that helps Sid to be even more disturbing, which I think helps. He's nothing too special, but he makes the second act of Toy Story a lot more entertaining. It's just that he's not, in terms of other Pixar villains, he's not that interesting. Next up is Al, I don't remember his last name. Al from Toy Story 2, owner of Al's Toy Barn, the chicken guy. He drives all the way to work on a Saturday. I like Al a lot. He's a really entertaining character to me. He isn't really the primary villain of Toy Story 2, that's Stinky Pete. But Al kind of serves as the main overall antagonist of the whole movie, since Stinky Pete isn't revealed to be the villain until the end. So Al has almost a full collection of the characters from Woody's Roundup, and the toys from that line were extremely rare because not a lot of them were made. They came out basically right around the time that the space race was happening, so people only wanted to play with space toys. But Al managed to find toys for almost every character from this show except for Woody, which is an extremely rare toy. So he steals Woody from a yard sale that he is at for some reason. Don't worry about that, it's not important. And basically he spends the entire rest of the money obsessing over how much money he has to spend on getting these toys to a museum in Japan. He's super greedy. He's just excited about how much money selling these toys is going to make him. He doesn't do a lot in the movie, but he is extremely entertaining thanks to Wayne Knight's really, really good voice performance. And yeah, he steals Woody, which leads to Woody meeting Jessie and Bullseye, so he kind of helps bring people together even though he's just a greedy jerk. Up next is Skinner from Ratatouille. I think he's chilling right there. He's just kind of on the box. Skinner is really entertaining as well. He's another villain that's not necessarily super threatening like Al, but also like Al, he's more humorous than anything else. But his motives are definitely very selfish. When he finds out that Linguini is the son of Gusteau, who owns the restaurant that Skinner works at, and is the head chef of, he wants to do anything he can to make sure that no one finds out about Linguini's family. But he becomes a lot more entertaining when Remy ends up working with Linguini to basically allow Linguini to keep working in the kitchen. Skinner sees Linguini talking to Remy multiple times, but at just the right time, manages to not actually be able to confirm that he saw him. Like, the lights will be turned off, or he'll be like driving on his moped and he'll drive by Remy, see him, back up, and Remy's not there anymore. So he gets a lot more paranoid as the movie goes on, which is very entertaining. When word gets out that Linguini is the heir of Gusteau's, Skinner is fired. And he's basically not really necessary in the story from that point on, but they keep him around. He captures Remy and then doesn't capture Remy, and at that point, he doesn't really need to be in the movie anymore. He doesn't affect anything else, but he is still quite an enjoyable character to watch, and he's voiced by Ian Holm, which definitely helps. And yeah, I don't have too much to say about Skinner. I just find him fun, and yeah, that's all to say about him. Alright, next up, it's time to talk about WALL-E, my favorite movie. So, yes, WALL-E is my favorite movie, but I can still admit that Otto is not the best Pixar villain. He's basically just the same character as HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and when I say basically, I mean he just is. Otto's role as a villain is that he feels that he has to follow his directive that he was given over 700 years ago to not let humans come back to Earth. You might think, oh, he's not really a villain then, he's just following his orders. Wrong, because he goes to violent measures to make sure that no one goes back to Earth. I mean, he tries to kill Wally, he electrocutes him and then crushes him and steals the plant and everything, and he tries to throw the captain into, like, prison, basically. He mutinies against him. So he doesn't necessarily serve as the most interesting villain, but for the context of WALL-E, what better villain could you have? And they kind of need to have a conflict, because otherwise, what would the story be, and how would the captain ever have the motivation to go back home? I think the inclusion of this villain is really good. I know some people don't agree, but I don't think that the ending of this movie would be able to come to fruition without his involvement. So yeah, basically that's all I have to say. Otto is really good for that movie, but in the whole list of Pixar villains, no way, he's not the best one. There's so many great ones. Alright, next up is Hopper from A Bug's Life. I don't think that A Bug's Life is that incredibly great, but I will still defend that movie forever, even though I don't love it as much as I used to. But Hopper is the best part of the movie by far. He has a really threatening presence the entire time. The first time he comes into the movie, he crashes through the ant's roof, and then he basically just disappears for the second act of the movie. The next time you do see him, he's chilling in a bar, and he is given the idea that they don't really even need to go back to the ant island. This leads to him remembering that Flick stood up to him, which he demonstrates by throwing grains at other grasshoppers, representing the grains as ants, because that's what the other people are saying to him. They're like, it's just one ant, what'll that do? And then he kills them by dumping all of the grains on them. This is a kid's movie, and the villain just straight up murders like 3 people to prove a point, and then they go back. Hopper is easily the best part and the best character in A Bug's Life, and that's literally all I have to say about it. Next up is Gabby Gabby from Toy Story 4. Gabby Gabby is kind of terrifying when you first meet her. She just lives in the antique store with really creepy ventriloquist dolls as her bodyguards. Her story is that no one has ever wanted to play with her because she has a broken voice box. So even though she has a pull string just like Woody does, she isn't able to make sounds from it, so she wants Woody's voice box. So yeah, she wants to steal Woody's organs. But the best part of this character isn't just her threatening and honestly terrifying plans. It's that she actually goes through with them. She does end up taking Woody's voice box for a chance to be noticed by a girl who is the granddaughter of the antique store owner. So she finally has a voice box that works. So she pulls her own pull cord, gets the interest of this little girl, and then she is completely disinterested because it's just an old doll. Why would I care about that? So she feels like she has no more purpose in life and is depressed. But then they give her a really good redemption. Woody decides to let her keep the voice box instead of taking it back. So they go outside the antique store to the fair that's going on right nearby, and they see a little girl who's crying and lost, so they think, hey, maybe you could help her out. So they get her attention by rolling a ball, and she turns her head and sees Gabby Gabby sitting like just on the ground. And the girl pulls her cord and she says, will you be my friend? That gives the confidence to go ask for help. And now Gabby Gabby gets to have someone that will play with her, and this girl is safe with her parents. It's good. It's a really good scene. It's way better than I explained it to be. It's not too often that Pixar villains get a redemption at all. Gabby Gabby is a really good villain, but I like that she does get a happy ending. Next up, I have the villain from Coco, Ernesto de la Cruz. His name is one of the first ones you hear in this movie because he's a famous musician, and the main character Miguel is a big fan of his music, even though he's not supposed to listen to music at all because of his family's vendetta against it. They hate music because Miguel's great-great-grandfather was a musician who left their family and never came back to pursue his dreams of music. Miguel later finds evidence that his great-great-grandfather might have been Ernesto. So when he goes to the land of the dead, he tries to find Ernesto so that he can get his blessing to go back to the regular living world and be allowed to listen to and play music again. However, when he gets there, it turns out that he's not actually Ernesto's relative at all. Miguel has been traveling with a skeleton named Hector, who has been dead for a very long time. And they come to find out that Hector is actually Miguel's great-great-grandfather. He wrote all of the songs that made Ernesto famous and popular, but Ernesto didn't like when Hector was going to go back to his family and take his songs with him. So, Ernesto murders Hector. He poisons Hector's drink, and he steals his songs, becoming a super famous and popular musician. The interesting thing is, his villain journey is already done when we meet him in the movie. The plot twist is actually really, really well done. But Ernesto isn't done yet because Miguel's family still wants to try to get him back to the land of the living, and Ernesto, at his big Dia de los Muertos concert, tries to kill Miguel and is caught on camera, so everyone hates him all of a sudden. Kind of the same thing as Chick, but done better. Ernesto is crushed by a bell that mirrors his actual death in the living world. So he isn't in the movie for too long, but I like that the journey of the movie is to find him, but then the reveal that he's just a garbage man, basically. And next up is Randall from Monsters, Inc. First off, Randall being voiced by Steve Buscemi is one of the best casting choices ever made in anything ever. Randall is honestly just a great character. Even though he's scary and menacing, he's constantly entertaining because he's Steve Buscemi. His motives and plan are pretty clear from the get-go. He wants to kidnap kids to steal their energy and, power the world. He doesn't work as a villain if his partner in this whole scheme isn't Waternoose. So I'll talk more about the whole plan and everything when I talk about Waternoose, but yeah, Randall is great. He's super menacing. He's also really funny to me. Next on the list is Charles Muntz from Up. He is literally the first character you see in this movie on the news on the march. Muntz's plan is to capture the bird of Paradise Falls and bring it back to America so that he will be regarded as a hero again, because he was accused of forgery. So he promised to not come back without it alive. The reason he's scary and threatening is because apparently every time someone else would come to the jungle by Paradise Falls, he assumed they were there for the bird. and it's implied that he kills them and clearly tries to kill Carl. He sets his house on fire, shoots at him. He also tries to kill Russell by tying him to a chair and putting him on the blimp door thingy as he opens it. And then the fight that he has against Carl on the blimp is honestly just hilarious and really good. Some great physical comedy there, old man fight, you know, it's great. Also, he's voiced by Christopher Plummer, and good casting in Pixar movies isn't anything surprising ever, but I always gotta give a shout out to the good casting of the characters in these movies. I think he's a good villain. I think he has a good part in being in the movie. They set him up well. That's all I have to say about that. I think he's a good villain. So next is Stinky Pete, the prospector from Toy Story 2. Like I said, Al isn't really the main major villain from Toy Story 2. That mostly goes to Stinky Pete. Stinky Pete was never bought when he was on store shelves because he came out right around the time that space toys were the most popular. So he never had any kid to call his own. He wants to go to the museum in Japan so that he will always be respected and paid attention to. Also, he's very manipulative. He tries to convince Jessie and Woody and Bullseye that they have to go to the museum with him because that's the only way they'll ever be loved again. He uses Jessie's story of being left behind by her previous owner to convince her that she has to go to the museum, and convinces Woody to go by saying Andy can't really love you if he left you at the yard sale. He's one of those characters that will do pretty much anything to accomplish his goals, which a lot of Pixar villains do, to be fair. When they're on the airport conveyor belts to go to the cargo hold on the plane, all of the other toys of Andy's are trying to save Woody, and Pete reopens the cut on Woody's arm and basically tries to kill him. But he's stopped and he is sentenced to an actual life of playtime with a child who draws on her toys. So yeah, you know, he gets what he deserves. I think this is a great villain because he does fit a really great part in this movie. He's evil, he's manipulative, he's a really good antagonist. But he's not the best Toy Story villain because that is Lotso from Toy Story 3. Obviously. Lotso, I hate him. He's, okay, so Lotso might be the most evil Pixar villain besides Syndrome. Lotso runs the daycare like a prison. He's completely ruthless. He mind controls Buzz to work as a prison guard so that the others can't escape, because the little kids need playtime. There's other toys, dude. Maybe if you weren't so terrible to them, then they would want to be played with, you freaking jerk. The main reason I think Lotso is so hated is what he does at the end of the movie. All of Andy's toys are on their way to the garbage, and they're on a conveyor belt to be incinerated, basically. Lotso gets stuck, so of course Woody and Buzz drop down to help him, and you know, coming very close to being destroyed. So when the opportunity comes for Lotso, who has reached a button that stops the conveyor, to save the rest of them, he completely abandons them, and that's why I hate him so much. He's so evil. Like, he thinks that he was abandoned and then replaced by his owner because he was lost, and his owner's parents got her a new version of the same type of toy he is. So he turned into an abusive prison owner. And he basically doesn't think other toys deserve to have another chance because he doesn't think he got another chance, even though they literally gave him a second chance. So he leaves them to die, and he's definitely the best villain in the Toy Story movies. Number 2 is Waternoose, because like I said with Randall, Waternoose and Randall kind of go together, but I think Waternoose is even more intimidating than Randall is. See, he's the one who actually specifically wants to kidnap children for generating more scream, but he gets Randall to help him with it. The thing about Waternoose is even though he is clearly evil because he's kidnapping children to generate energy, he does feel bad for having to banish Sully and Mike to the Himalayas. Waternoose is one of the best twist villains in movie history, I think. His motives are foreshadowed from the start, really. And most importantly, when he is revealed to be the villain, he doesn't undergo a sudden personality shift into the evil businessman who just wants his company to live. He was already like that. He just is more open about his plans now. He doesn't need to keep this secret. I like the way that Randall is kind of a red herring but still an actual villain, and the way that Waternoose is such a commanding presence. I mean, he's like the CEO of this entire business. He's in the first scene of the movie as well. He's one of the first characters you meet. And he sets up the premise of how they need Scream for power and mentions that they have a shortage. So his intentions are kind of set up earlier on. And now we're down to number 1, which is obviously Syndrome from The Incredibles. I don't think anyone would disagree. I think nearly everybody would probably say their favorite Pixar villain is Syndrome. Well, there's a lot of reasons. So Syndrome is funny and terrifying and evil and cares not about people at all. At the start of the movie, he's a super fan of Mr. Incredibles, who Mr. Incredible tells, "Go away, you're not safe here, I work alone." Buddy only pays attention to the I work alone part and forgets the part where Mr. Incredible literally saves his life. This kid would have been blown up by a bomb if Mr. Incredible didn't save him, but he doesn't care about that. He felt like he was rejected. So as he gets older, he somehow becomes rich. He owns his own private island and makes lots of giant robots. Basically, he figures out the secret identities of a bunch of the big superheroes from when superheroes were still legal, and is able to convince them to join his projects to destroy giant robots. What they don't know is that he's making these giant robots to kill them. Once he creates the perfect version of this robot that no other superhero can destroy, he's going to attack a city and save it as a new superhero so that everyone will love him. Then he can sell his inventions that allow him to be super so that everybody can be super. I think that The Incredibles is the best superhero movie ever made, and Syndrome is the best villain ever in a superhero movie. He's just so evil, but he's also kind of goofy. It's like part of the thing. He's not completely serious. He monologues to himself a bunch. He's kind of clumsy. He's really careless with his inventions. I don't feel like I need to explain why Syndrome is the best Pixar villain. So I'm just gonna leave it there. I don't want to have this outro go on for too long like I tend to. So my question of the day is, what's your Pixar villain ranking, if you are willing to put your entire ranking? And you are allowed to include characters that I didn't for this list. If you want to include Barracuda from Finding Nemo, go ahead. If that's S tier, get out of here. If you subscribe to my channel right now, then you will be appreciated by me very gratefully. But yeah, just leave comments, I'll read them, that'll be cool and stuff. And stay positive. That's not even my outro. So, until next time, I will see you next time.